to do a welcome, and then after that I'm going to do a smudge, and I'll explain that when we get to it. I would like to welcome you all to the traditional territory and ancestral homelands of the Mi'kmaq Nation, specifically to Chibuktuk. We had place names for every river, every land formation, every cove, and in the case of Halifax, every great harbor. My ancestors have been living on this territory for well over 13,000 years. However, I would like to focus on the last 100 years. All Nova Scotians are aware of the horrible events that unfolded on December 6, 1917. This catastrophe affected all Nova Scotians and changed the landscape and identity of the Chibuktuk and Halifax. I would also like to acknowledge George Francis Cope, age 3, Thomas Cope, age 12, William Nevin, age 4, and William Paul, 4 hours old. Just a few of the Mi'kmaq who lost their lives and whose stories have never been told. As Nova Scotians, we have been told stories our entire lives about the impact of the collisions on the Narrows and the aftermath in the days and weeks that followed. I remember as a child, I learned very little of the effects of the explosion had on Africville, just down over the hill from where we currently stand right now. As a child, how many of us actually learned about Africville at all? Until recently, no one cared about the decimation of the Mi'kmaq settlement that was just across the harbor in what is known as Turtle Grove. People's homes are heated from a power plant on that very location that George, Thomas, and William died. A Mi'kmaq community on the outskirts of Dartmouth completely destroyed. I remember hearing the stories about the community survivors being taken in by relatives and other reserves around Nova Scotia. And as an adult, learning more about the history of my own people, I was not surprised to learn that this same community had been fighting to be relocated further away as residents didn't want us living so close in the first place. This relocation was to take place just a few short days after the explosion. Many communities tell their history through storytelling and oral tradition. It is a way to pass down collective knowledge and keep a living account of the impacts of daily lives. These markers throughout the city are another way of passing down part of the story of Halifax Explosion, from the eyewitness accounts of the collision, the immediate aftermath of the explosion, the confusion, the death, and the reconstruction of the city. I commend each and every one of you for the work you have done here today. But we still need to do more, to question, and to ensure all narratives are told. The marker beside us just to the right states, "A new city has risen out of the ashes of the old. We rub our eyes and look again, but the vision does not fade. The new city remains and grows, building by building, street by street, amid the tumultuous music of 1,000 hammers, the wholesome discord of 1,000 saws." As you tour the park today, reading the words on the markers and in every piece of metal, I ask you to keep in mind what stories are untold, whose houses were rebuilt and whose were not. As the thousands of hammers created music, as the 1,000 saws hummed out a tune, who was afforded the economic opportunity to rebuild the city? Who benefited? And which community members were told they were worth 20% less than others? I ask, if you are a visitor to our city, to take in all this beautiful city has to offer, the parks, the vibrant streetscapes, the monuments, the museums, and the entertainment. It is Pride Week after all. But just as I ask you to think of those stories that remain untold here, please do the same during your visit. Who were the streets named after? Who were the parks named after? What community artwork is represented? Who are the monuments for? When you leave and return home, I also ask you to look at your own cities through the exact same lens. We are in an age of reconciliation, but it's time for reconciliation. The Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action lay out 94 specific items to be addressed by Canadian institutions, but specifics can lead to check boxes, and these do not create change. I implore you all to start looking at the 10 principles of reconciliation to guide your daily lives, both professional and personal. To me, you cannot have reconciliation without relationships. Relationships begin when we listen to each other's stories. Reconciliation begins when we believe those stories. Let's continue to build these relationships by telling all the stories. Stop ignoring or dismissing narratives of some of our citizens so we can get on with reconciliation. We can begin through real collaboration with all of those gathered here today to work with the Mi'kmaq Nation in creating plaques or markers throughout HRM that tell the rich Mi'kmaq history in the area. From a marker that tells about the Bury the Hatchet ceremony that took place in 1761 on the grounds of what is now the court on Spring Garden Road, to the monuments telling the real stories of the signing of the scalping proclamations and the emotional legacy that's been left because of that. I ask you to take directions from our knowledge holders to identify areas and create markers and monuments that tell of our significant history that goes back thousands of years in this area. We need to remember, in Nova Scotia, we are all treaty people, and because of this, the history of my ancestors is the history of all of us as Haligonians, Nova Scotians, and Canadians. Wulalio. So right now, I am going to do a prayer and a smudge. And when we smudge, what we're doing is we're preparing ourselves to do some good work, right? We take some sacred medicines, some of those medicines that have been given to us, and for me, I'm going to be using sage right now. It's one of the medicines that I've been given to carry. And we take the smoke and we put it over our heads, and it gets rid of all the negative things that we may have thought, and it makes room for us to think positive in the things that are going on around us. We take the smoke and we put it over our eyes, and it gets rid of all those negative things we've seen, and it makes room for us to see the positive in everything. We take the smoke and we put it over our ears, and it gets rid of all those negative things that we've heard, and it makes room for us to hear the positive in all the conversations that are happening around us. And we take the smoke and put it over our mouths, and it gets rid of all those negative things we said. It makes room for us only to speak positivity and the truth. I also smudge my heart so that all my actions come from here, from that point forward. And I also like to smudge my feet because that's what's in contact with Mother Earth, so I do that out of respect to the Earth. I'm going to be doing a prayer to the 7 directions. When we talk about decolonizing our thoughts and our processes, I think that's one of the good places to start. We always focus on 4 cardinal points, but we forget 3 very important directions, right? We forget the direction above, and we forget the direction below, but most importantly, we forget that direction within. So right now I'm going to light my smudge bowl, and I am going to be doing a prayer to the 7 directions. If we can get it lit.